Hello and welcome to Dialogue Spring Festival Special. I'm Jennifer Sheng. Fashion, a word that might have seemed irrelevant in a less affluent China, is now center stage in the 21st century. What are the current fashion platforms in China? How is the see now, buy now business model changing the industry? And what's up with the younger generation and their attitudes about what to wear and how to wear it? To talk about fashion in modern China, I'm very pleased today to be joined in this very fashionable setting by designer Percy Gilbert, who is an honorary dean at Yingcheng Institute, a top design school in China. Also, Duan Yuanling, who is the chair of Open Heart Design Alliance, and Cao Yuan, who is a final year student at Institute Yingcheng. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Dialogue. So first up, let's talk about fashion in China and how it's changed over the past 10 years. What do you think are the driving forces behind it?
I think the driving forces at the beginning definitely is to express yourself and following that change, right? 10 years ago, probably very much about price tag, status, and today, especially younger generations, I guess, is so much drive for self-expression, personalities, and also, of course, it's still a little bit not that confident with the entire world, but still catching up. I think we're really in this emerging stage. It's very exciting, and there are lots of new trends emerging and new talents emerging. It's a very exciting time.
And Percy, what do you think about the change that's occurred over the past decade?
Oh, actually, it reminds me of, I would say, Europe in the 80s, when, you know, power dressing was coming in, everything was new, and everyone was, like, experimenting. So I feel like there's that same kind of energy happening right now here in China.
And we kind of do see that emergence of 80s and 90s fashion on the catwalks these days as well. So it's interesting that you mention that the industry is also taking on that creative vibe. And Cao Yuan, do you have an opinion of how you think, maybe yourself, how do you view fashion these days? You're kind of a representative of the younger generation.
Yeah, I'm a younger generation designer. I think now fashion has become an important part of life.
Do you think the younger generation in China are all on kind of the same trajectory or trend towards what is cool, what is hip these days?
I think peer pressure is the same anywhere in the world. And, you know, I remember being at school, and at the time my parents wouldn't let me or wouldn't get me, like, you know, the cool trendy trainers. So I managed to wear an old pair that looked cool, so my friends, they didn't know, you know, they didn't know that how old they were. Yeah. So I was okay, I was safe. And I feel that, you know, it's the same anywhere in the world. And so what I see with the young people is that, you know, they're enjoying expressing themselves, you know, and there's many ways to express themselves. They can do it on social networking, but they can also do it through their clothing and what they're wearing.
Okay. And Yuanling, how do you think Chinese fashion is making its mark on the industry? Like, is there a specific type of Chinese trait in fashion that is different from that of, let's say, other traditional fashion meccas like Paris, Tokyo, London?
I think, like 2 years ago, I helped to develop a fashion brand called Live, both in Stockholm and in Shanghai. And that time, I kind of dive into this fashion world a little bit more. But from my experience, I think Chinese fashion really have been desperately seeking an identity, and it's never really there. But the most interesting trend for me was, it depends how you define young, right? And I think for the younger generation, probably in the like 80s, they are looking for not only this like a dashing style that really look at me, but you see this duan sheli, this really minimalistic, little express myself with confidence inside, and the very minimum details, a little bit asymmetrical cut. And I think there are some similar traits among those younger generations, especially those who graduate from St. Martin's. It's like they're unanimously all doing the same thing but differently. I think that trend also became very obvious, like became a kind of Chinese symbol. But the latest one, most recent one, is the Xinzhongshi, the new Chinese design. That you take very detailed Chinese details, but traditional detail, but they emerge in a very fashionable or trendy general look. So I think that's very expression or reflection of self-confidence, and it's like a little bit more confident on who you are and who you want to be and showcase. And I found that's most exciting and probably a little bit anti-fashion. You know, it's not very new all the time, but it's definitely a pro-culture. Yeah.
And Percy, do you agree with that? Do you think that's the unique trait of Chinese fashion right now?
Yeah, actually, I would agree with that. You know, when I studied fashion, I learned that you should always research history. And China has thousands and thousands of years of history. So I find that designers here are taking inspiration from that. And also, I read that back in China, showing your social status, you know, you actually kind of wore your social status. So if you had loads of embroidery on your clothing, you were from a high, social standing. And actually, I think I see that coming through on the catwalks as well during Chinese Fashion Week. And
Taoyuan, what do you think about Chinese fashion and its unique traits? I mean, moving aside from just traditional qipao and, the collared shirts and jackets, do you think this is going to be an indelible mark on the international industry?
I think of it as a trend. The trend seems to be changing. Take last year Gucci show, for example. I saw many Chinese elements in design. Chinese elements have had an impact on international Chinese designer. I think it's my dream. I'm very excited.
Great. And as we know, Japanese designers have had a very strong influence on Western fashion. Can the same be said for Chinese designers?
Actually, I would say, the word haute couture means high fashion. So it's the pinnacle of fashion. And there's a group in China, they're called the Chambre Syndicale. Now they decide who's allowed to use the term haute couture, because in France it's actually illegal to use it unless you've been invited in to use this. And so you've got very big names in fashion like Givenchy and Christian Dior. And then now you have Chinese designers coming in like Guo Pei as well, who've been invited. So I think Chinese fashion has come a very long way, and to be invited by this group is something really special. Every designer probably desires this.
And Yan Ling, what do you think about Japanese fashion, Korean fashion, and the influence that it's also had on the younger generation of Chinese?
I was also the judge for Design for Asia Award, because this year we gave to Yuji Yamamoto. I found that all the audience in the whole dining hall, there's tremendous respect for that person. I think Japanese designer has really established their mystique, as a personality, their style, their pursuit. So Chinese designers collectively is still a little bit unclear. Guo Pei is a really outstanding example for haute couture, but there are so many designers that have a very individual exploration of fashion. So, I was in Davos, we were wearing Helen Lee as a friend of mine, and we was like, oh gosh, 10 years ago she was doing something completely differently. Now she's pursuing skin wear. So I think there's so much change. You cannot really define this is it, We only can say probably in the future there's a really strong personality, can stay a little bit stable as a who I am, and very confident showing this is me, and I'm going to evolve, but I'm not going to today this and today that. I think that's showing maturity, and that will really build a legacy.
And speaking of Guo Pei, she is kind of, the iconic couture designer in China, but for other young Chinese designers that want to reach that status, if that's in their goal, or for that to happen, do you think they need to do something like design for Rihanna at the 2015 Met Gala in order to get that recognition? What else needs to happen besides just making a splash internationally for them to really become like the Yoji, what was his name?
Yoji Yamamoto.
Yeah.
What do you think, Percy?
Well, I actually think, China's been going through a stage where everything from abroad is amazing, like you see all these luxury brands. But I see what is happening now is that people in China are starting to develop an appetite for their own talent.
Now, Tao Yuan, speaking of the younger generation, what do you think is the most important thing to keep in mind when designing for them?
I think the most thing for a younger generation of designers is to learn. I think learning is the foundation of understanding fashion. Having a correct attitude is important, as well as working hard. Don't worry, continue doing creative work, to be fresh, to be new.
And do you think the younger generation, maybe you can answer this, Percy, you're a professor at the Institute Yingcheng, the fashion school in China. Do you see that dedication with young designers wanting to learn about fashion and not just going for the quick fix? Because that's kind of the age we live in, right? Everyone wants to A to B like that.
Yeah.
No steps taken.
Yeah,
So
I'd agree with that. I worked with Alexander McQueen when he was alive, and he had so much energy, so much creativity, you know, when he would tell me about something I was working on, you know, it was all about a feeling. And so when I'm with the students here in China, I'm getting that similar kind of vibe from them. You know, they're loving what they're doing. There's an energy and a passion. I think without passion you can't get anywhere, but I'm seeing the passion. You know, I get messages from students at like midnight. Oh, Percy, what do you think of this design? And you know, people are sending me their work. For me, that's passion, and I think it can't really be stopped. It's a movement.
okay. And Yinling, as a Chinese consumer, do you feel proud of Chinese fashion brands, and can you identify strongly with them?
I think for me, I really identify myself as a planetary citizen. So I think when I choose fashion, I would not really choosing from where they're coming from. But unavoidably, I will be always excited if I discover something from China. And but one thing I truly felt I want to highlight a little bit here is like I feel fashion cannot be really just about fashion today. It is one of the most polluting industry in the world. And I think the idea of awareness or consciousness and of the material we use and how much we consume, I think it is a time for us to put it on the agenda. It's not just about design, it's not about the next trend, especially for a country like this in China. I mean, this is such a huge demand, our living situation, really, really challenging situation for our environment. I think the students, probably schools, probably can put a little bit more comfort, like emphasis on that. Because I stay a lot in Stockholm, I think that's a huge trend of being conscious design and environmental friendly choices of material and details about, or even recycling design. I think we are really talking about fashion as a manifestation, not only what we wear, but what we believe in.
So it might be a luxury, but we still need to be socially responsible about it in our design and not just produce.
Exactly, and that's just a scary future for everyone.
That's a very good point you raise. I know that there are some high-end design brands in Europe that are using raw materials like milk protein or mushrooms to create, you know, the soles of shoes and the zippers and backpacks. So this is really interesting. And also, if you're backpacking, I guess if you're hungry, you can just... Exactly. We'll see about that. Now, it's no secret that China was once the manufacturing mecca of the world, and still is. But how much do you think China has gone from made in China to designed in China?
Well, actually, I live in, I would say, the central part of Beijing, which is Sanlitun. It's the main shopping area. Like, you know, if you're in London, it's like the Oxford Street. Living there, I see so many people wearing, you know, crazy designs, fantastic fashion. And some of the stores there that are starting to open are actually Chinese brands. Some of them stay open, you know, maybe just for 3 months, and then they have to close down. But some of them actually are succeeding, and they're doing well, which I think is an amazing thing.
That's great. Well, we're headed for a short break now on Dialogue. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Dialogue's Spring Festival Special. Today we're talking about fashion in modern China. Now, many of these fast fashion brands like Uniqlo, H&M, Zara, they're doing very well in China, but what does that mean for local designers? Does that pose a threat, you think?
I think we're talking about very different markets. Like those brands you mentioned, they're really penetrating like third or fourth tiers even, because we work with Uniqlo a little bit. They're going to open 1,000 stores in the coming year in China. I think the Chinese designer as a concept today is still talking about independent, young, emerging designers. And they are really facing a really interesting market that with this younger generation looking for expressing their identity. So they always have a chance for 3 months, as you mentioned. But if they can stick longer, that depends how long, you know, they can really stick around the test of time.
And Percy, what do you think is behind the success of stores like Zara, H&M, and these fast fashion brands?
Actually, I think behind the success internationally, so not just in China but around the world, is the fact that people are watching, you know, the same movies. You know, they're going online, influenced by the same kind of stars, etc. So I think, funnily, Chinese consumers are starting to be influenced by the same things as the West. And that's why these brands are successful, and you know, maybe they see something on TV that they like. You know, it's very easy to wear easy clothing, so they can just go and buy it. They know where to buy it.
But also, they have I mean, those brands you mentioned, they're truly a huge brand machine. You know, they have 1,000 designers in-house, and they have extremely sophisticated distribution channels. They have one world's best branding company working for them. But for China, in fashion, they still stay a little bit handicrafts, and there's explorations, and you know, there's still a very early stage. I think the ecosystem is still very, very immature.
Yeah, actually, the company that brought me to China was actually a Swedish company called J. Lindberg. And, you know, they're in like the top
Jack
3.
and Jones?
Yeah, the J. Lindberg is like in the top 3 in Sweden.
Right.
And what happened was one of the girls in Sweden who was designing for J. Lindberg went over to H&M. And so talking to her was very interesting. And she's saying, Percy, you know, it's amazing. You know, we were designing and we're talking about quantities of 1,000. But now I'm sitting in a meeting and we're talking about millions, millions of one design that I'm doing.
Wow.
And, you know, it's a whole different ballgame. When you get to that stage.
But they are facing challenges. H&M's e-commerce is doing not so well, and the recent year they're considered to be quite a new challenge they're facing.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just market is like
much.
that.
Right.
It just
ups and downs.
Yeah, you can never be the top forever.
I think actually the reason that is because brands like H&M, a lot of times they're following, they're not so creating. You know, they're not creating, and you find that the brands that are succeeding online are the ones that are doing something new, something different. So, you know, and I think that's the problem that H&M have. I think they need to be doing something a little bit crazy, you know, something, maybe they get 50 young designers and then just let them run wild.
But you know, H&M as a group, because they are from Sweden, so I know them pretty well.
Right.
They're creating really little bit different franchises, like Another Stories and COS and Arctic as recently.
Yes.
I think this whole see now or buy now things trend is really facing a social challenge. That's why they need to find a new way of expressing this whole more considerate, social aware, and also a little bit minimalist approach instead of this high fashion, quick fashion. I think that's also a huge trend as a background information for that change.
Okay. And in this day of Taobao and shopping via WeChat, and I don't know if you can buy fashion in group chats, but it's not unheard of. You have individual retailers that are posting in their moments pictures of clothes, shoes, bags, sometimes knockoff, sometimes real. Okay, so in this digital age where everything is just click of a button, you know, Alipay, WeChat, money transfers, how do you get people off their sofas and into the stores?
I think, for example, Hollister is an American brand. I go to their shop, they remind me being at the beach. I think it's interesting. Maybe can catch this point used by Chinese design, like store desire.
So I actually agree with you. It's the store design. It's the experience that you're creating, you know, for people. Now going shopping, the competition on online business is really, you know, strong, and so retailers have to create an experience in their stores. You know, it's almost like, you know, when you go to a coffee shop with your friends, you know, and the coffee shops, you know, a nice atmosphere and, you know, things. So I think it's the brave retailers. Brands like, there's a brand called Gentle Monster, and they have one of those stores here. Now they create an amazing experience. It's like Alice in Wonderland, walking around the stores and all these things to discover. People are taking photos as though they're in an art gallery. So for me, the way to get the customer is through the experience.
And also maybe there's a new word called network retail. It's like Lululemon. Not only you create experience, you have to create an experience that's worth to share with peers. So the idea is that you want to go there together. You want to share a community that's also beyond that personal, individual experience. It's all influenced by e-commerce, I guess. But partially also calls for this idea of as a community, because you cannot get that feeling on your sofa. Or if you wander in one store and by yourself and taking Snapchat or selfie, that's a little bit sad.
It happens though. But you know, but like, you know, like we say, the young people are going to these stores with their friends and they're, you know, discovering things. They're taking photos around it, and I think this is what retailers have to do. I personally have to say that I think retail is going to change. It's going to change. You know, I've been around for quite some time, and I think in like 10, 20 years, it's going to look very different to what it looks like now, because I think they're finding it hard to compete with online.
So for me personally, because I live in China, I live in Beijing, and some of the brands that I like are in Canada. And so when my husband goes abroad, I'm like loading up on the cart for, you know, international stores like Aritzia or even Saks and stuff. And so I don't know my sizes necessarily, because I haven't been to a store in that long, believe it or not. So for me, online shopping is tricky, but I think where retail can play a role is like once people go in and they develop a loyalty to a certain brand and they know their sizes, then I can see how it's going to be hard to bring them to the store, to go through the line, to get out of their house, to park their car or whatever, and go shopping rather than just at the comfort of their own home and look at pictures. So
I felt that this either you want to go shopping as experience, or as a destination, or as you go to cinema, or you want to get it and go. I think if you want to grab something you want to go, e-commerce definitely is the way to go.
If you know
but I guess if you truly feel you want to enjoy the entire process, I guess that's why you go shopping, especially in Japan or Paris. The whole process with someone greeting you, do the really perfect package, chatting with you, the whole appearance make that item such a special item. So I thought that if you want to have something really special, you still want to take the hassle, because it is your entire experience. But this one click away. I don't know if you do that. I do this click, click, click. I buy a lot. When they come, okay, if the size doesn't matter, okay, I even keep it out there. Okay, try something else. Because if something comes too easy, it doesn't really, you know, bring out something so special about you. So it's just an item. It's never a part of you that you feel, okay, that can accompany for 5 years of my life or something. So I think there's different mentality we're playing with, and we're catering different customers.
And the mentality that you mentioned really speaks to the see now, buy now mentality that's happening in the fashion industry. Percy, maybe you can explain to our viewers. I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what see now, buy now is. So can you give us a quick synopsis?
So I would say pretty much, you know, the word say it for themselves. People are, you know, we live in a culture now where people want things instantly. You go to McDonald's, you get something. Especially in China, if I want anything, I just tap, tap, tap on my phone. I don't speak much Chinese, but I can guess what's going on, you know. And so now companies are starting to cater to that desire where you want it now, you want it now. And it's growing. Actually, Burberry was about a year ago. They tried something new on their catwalks, and they put like tags on everything. So as things went down the catwalk, people could actually start ordering. You know, so this is how far, you know, the see now, buy now has gone, so that even a big giant like Burberry is changing the way they're doing their catwalks.
But there are some old school fashion brands and designers that are not about the see now, buy now business model. They argue that it takes away from the romanticism that you mentioned, the longing for that experience, for that item that you wait so patiently for.
Yeah.
And then if you just get it, if you see it, you know, on the digitals online before it's even come out on the fashion runway, then what is that appeal? It kind of erases the desire.
It's exactly this difference from the fast food or gourmet.
Yes.
It really depends where stage of life you are, what you want. But the fast food is not that healthy, we all know. And it just, if we really turn a blind on that, it's okay, see now, buy now. That's what I mentioned, why we have to talk about this big issues of social responsibility, la la la. But this is see now, buy now, it scientifically is proven it's really doing damage to our brain. And it never really, there's a backlash, there's the slow food, slow fashion. I think the slowness is this age is called for sure.
I actually, funnily, I agree with you on that point. But I actually think it's a generation thing. And I believe young people lead the way. That's why I work with young people. And it doesn't matter so much how much I don't want, you know, people to be using their phone all the time. It's what's happening. So for me, I think companies need to discuss how they can work with this. You know, I read an article where people are saying, you know, they're approaching Apple and saying, you know, what cap can you put on your phones so that young people don't spend so much time because it's becoming an addiction.
Right.
And so on the other hand, though, I think things are changing. You've got young people who are growing up. You know, when I was growing up, mobile phones were just coming out. So I know a time before mobile phones, before everyone had mobile phones. Whereas now everyone has mobile phones. And the young people that are, you know, growing up and been born and starting to influence, they've always known mobile phones. It's all they've known. You know, so actually I feel that there's a change happening, and you've kind of got to embrace it and also shape it.
Well, this is a very interesting subject. Unfortunately, that wraps up the first chapter of our talk about fashion in modern China. We'll pick up on the issue of see now, buy now tomorrow, and also what's up with the younger generation. Tune in to Dialogue tomorrow.